Okay, ladies and gents, this is going to be a breakdown of this satellite sort of terrain that I put together. This is not a tutorial. I'm just going to show you how I put this together. It's a little bit of a complicated, finicky little piece of work. And it all started off from me taking some height information from Terrain Party, and then it was from a really far distance, and I thought, you know, how would I recreate something like that if I was just to use something completely procedural? So I set to work just kind of looking at the shapes, and I thought, okay, you know what, I could probably pull that off of the flow pattern from Erosion. So I started off with a slope noise, which is going to give me something to pull an erosion on. That's going to be interesting, because if it was just a flat gradient, it wouldn't be. And that gradient is just going to go a long way down. So the wear and the flow pattern from that combined together should give me something to start working from. So I took those together, combined them as an add, and I got something like this. Now, I chose to go the path of doing some aperture to thicken it out, so 3 levels there. I blurred that a little bit, and then I apertured back inwards by 1 just to sharpen the edge, and then I combined them together as an add. Now I'm just going to show you an alternative to this. So the alternative is instead going with screen. Screen is not going to give me values out of bounds, but there's a difference in how I'm planning on using this. So where this one provides me with a sharper sort of base, let me just borrow this constant that I've been floating around to check stuff. It's nice to have something just to kind of check the height information. So I have this right here is the shape that I'm starting with versus the shape that I decided to go with. So I lost values, but I ended up having sort of a shrinking of these areas based on what I did. So I'm sure there's potential to go ahead and use this variant instead, because it provides me with sharper kind of grooves in the middle, but that's not the route that I chose when I went through this. So maybe in another future version I'll try that. Okay, so I went with that, and I processed it through Erosion, which gave me that, and then I did a combine with min, which I often will do in these cases, because what it does is it will subtract any of the additional sedimentation that's there. So where we had this, right, I lost all those grooves, those interior sections. So doing a min keeps those formations at the top there, but carves back in that empty space that I wanted to keep. So I get some of the volume back. Then I took that and I multiplied it with its original shape. Right? So multiplying it with itself, I get more prominent peaks. Then I wanted to eat away at shape even further, and in order to just definitively eat away at its shape, I took the wear values from the erosion, separated them off, and I went with power. So power, keep in mind that I've also reduced the height of this terrain, so the two of them combined together provided me with very defined peaks. Moving along from that, I went back and borrowed a bit of this original shape. Let's just show you what that is again. So this rounded shape, with these ultra peaks, and I got that. So that was a regular add combine, and then I did a blend between it and these other ones. So by doing an add, I brought back some of the volume, but then doing a blend, I get to blend backwards, so how much of that volume do I want to keep? So it's not completely gone, it's just kind of like taking the whole thing and raising it up a little bit. So you notice how those peaks sort of stayed where they were, because I'm getting 50% of the peaks from this one, and I'm getting 50% of the peaks from this one, which is a mixture of the other one, if that makes sense. So basically what it did is it took those peaks and it put them on top of the other form. Little trick. Okay, so now that I've stacked those peaks on top of that base, I've got something nice to work with, and I'm gonna go ahead and invert it to deal with these river lake areas that I didn't want to keep. So because these are here, I actually probably could have gone back and stolen some of this. Here, let's take this and combine with our inverted one here. That's not what I wanted. I wanted that. There we go. So I take that and combine it with my little thing. And that would have worked. So that's not what I did, but I got some other results off of it, so it's fine. So I went with this and I said, you know what, I want to eat away at that. Want something that's going to only eat away kind of the top. Well, I thought erosion, so I went ahead and I went to erosion and I eroded it to heck. 25%, man. So then of course I did a min on that. Or actually, rather, no, I didn't. What I did was I went ahead and I took the wear and subtracted it from this original shape. So yeah. So a lot more detailed than that, I think, right? So the end result of that, inverting it, was this. And the pieces in between looked kind of cool. There's lots of detail in there to work with. But the spikes were crazy. So this is the finicky part of the piece. What I ended up doing to fix this actually helped me create this shape. So taking this, I went through aperture, and depending on the resolution that I was working with, determined how many times I had to actually run this operation. So I had to run at 3 at 2K. If I go up to 4K, I might have to go to 4. So somewhere in that range of sort of 1 per level. So at 512 it's 1, 1K, it's 2, 2K, it's 3, 3K, it'd probably be 4, and on up. So I took that and apertured it, and then brought back this earlier version and combined them together, 50% blend, and that gave me something decent. So it actually starts to look like an interesting shape. A little bit of erosion on there. Erosion helps shape and form the tops of those peaks a little bit nicer. And then taking that and this massive chaos, what I want are all the low values, so I just run a min operation. So I don't keep the peaks, but I do get the valleys, right? So these valleys in here that have been washed away, I get some of those back. It gives me something interesting. And that's not all. So I lower it down a little bit, but I think, you know what, I really like those other peaks from before. I would like to add a little bit more detail in here. These are nice, but I'd like a little bit more. So what I did is I went all the way back, not that far back, this one. So remember this one? We went ahead and got these really stark peaks. Well, I brought those all the way back to this and blended them in and chose a balance that I liked. So the last thing to do was I'd like to get some little rivers in there, and I went ahead and took the flow from the erosion and I just subtracted that flow. Blink. And that's it. And there's my terrain. So the one I posted had color, but I'm not really happy with the color. I want to do the color again. What's great about having some of these separate is I can do stuff like I can pull this off and use this to color just the river. Keeping some of those different separate elements, I could use them to generate different texture places. I just have to start thinking my way through the process a little bit nicer in order to get what I wanted. So hopefully you found something useful, interesting in here. I know it's a little bit fiddly in terms of a terrain, but that's how I put it together.